We're gonna go live. Did I set this to public? I did. Righteous. Started off with some coffee. Once a princess, always a princess. That is what my mug says. It's a good mug. It's a good mug. The best part about this mug is its size. It's huge. Look at that. That almost looks as big as my head when I hold it out like that. But when I put it next to my head, you can see, it's like as big as my face. A face worth of coffee this mug can handle, which is nice. The tea is brewing here. The smoothie is finished. That's over there. We'll put you over here. I don't want to look at you anymore. I've got my teacups ready. I've got this holder here to take the tea steeper at this point. Good morning, Andrew. Good morning, Tom. What is up? What is up? The sky. You get to do that joke once in your life. And then from then onwards, you gotta learn some restraint for yourself. I'm not dressing down, Andrew. I'm dressing up. This is a shirt. It's a shirt from my friend Hayden Humphrey, who has led coach training at the same company I used to lead it at, and was up to a whole bunch of cool stuff. And he, hey Evan, and he was like, I'm gonna make t-shirts. I'm gonna send out t-shirts. And so he wrote me and was like, dude, I'd love for you to to have one of my t-shirts. And I was like, hell yeah, these are cool. So he's got a whole bunch of different stuff you can get here. It's made by a company called Canvas, which I love their shirts. Often you've probably had this experience too, where you go away to some event, it's a conference, and then you get the bag of swag, and then the t-shirt in it fucking sucks. It's horrible. And it's like, that's the logo is, or whatever is on it is like right there. And then it's like a thick burlappy material. It's probably like a Hanes shirt or something like that. And it just sucks. And it's not a shirt that you would actually wear. And Canvas, my tea is now ready. I'm going to take out the tea. Canvas is a company that made this shirt. They made another shirt that I have that I really love. And so I was like, oh my God, I could get shirts made that are nice to wear, that feel good on the skin and look good on the body. They're not just this, frame that just, you are a refrigerator and we have designed the shirt just for you. Here you go, rectangle human. So anyhow, I'm trying to find out, hey, what's the deal? Like, where can I get these shirts made? Because I have a bunch of ideas for that I'd love to bring into existence, and I want to give away cool swag at our events and stuff like that. So thanks, Evan. Yeah, I've been working out a lot. Well, I've been working out for like 2 years, but since Christmas we got a Peloton, so I've been cycling a lot in the mornings, and then usually the way I think of it is I'm commuting to work and then I commute back home from work, which is kind of cool. So that's feeling good. Hey Heather, good morning. If you haven't written something or shared your name in the chat yet, please do so that we all know who is here. It's more fun than when we can be in this kind of concept together. So let us see. What do I start off by sharing? One of the things that's been happening for me lately is my practice is fairly quiet, meaning I don't have a lot of people I'm working one-on-one with. A lot of my time is occupied with a few things. One is the Creating Clients course, which Tom is in. Evan and Heather have both been a part of it. Andrew has been in it. Hey, Lindsay. Good to see you. So that Creating Clients course is ongoing. We're in the second iteration of it. And I've got a fair bit of attention and intention on that right now. We have 15 people going through this time, which is a nice number. And in addition to doing that, I'm also talking a lot at various ICF chapters, the International Coach Federation chapters, about this idea of like creating clients. And the reason I'm geared on that is that, cool watch. The ICF, the International Coach Federation, has what's listed as the core competencies for coaching. If you're curious about these, you could just type in ICF core competencies. You get this list of them. There's Last time I checked, there were 8, 9, 10. I think there's 11 total. And so these competencies are like establishing trust and intimacy with the client. And then there's a bunch of subheadings underneath that. So like coach trusts the client in their own process and as the one to lead and guide the session. Coach trusts their own intuition and shares that with the client in such a way that honors both the client's process and what is showing up for the coach, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So these are great, first of all. Like we need, absent something like this, it's like when people decide they're an artist, but they have never even learned anything. They're just like, I'm an artist. I'm going to call myself an artist. And they throw hot dogs at a canvas and that's the end of it. And it's like that can, that can work. You can do that. But part of a craft is that we have guidelines and some rules and some things that help us understand it. Because otherwise we don't have anything to distinguish it from it, right? How would you know that advice is anything separate from coaching? They're drastically different. So we need these guidelines. It's important to have these competencies. The International Coach Federation is the largest international body regulating coaching. And here's the problem that I'm present to, and the reason I'm so intent right now on speaking in these chapters, is that the ICF requires for us to have a credential. It requires you to renew your credential. You have to get what's called a continuing education unit. It's actually a CCEU, a continuing coach education unit. Legal profession has these. They're called CLEUs, continuing legal education units. Medical profession has these. Many, many, many professions with a body of standards and stuff like that requires you to renew and requires you to do this. And so I can create something like the intensive that we run, and we go to the ICF and we say, here's what we're doing. This is what we're going to cover in terms of your core competencies. Can you sort of certify us to grant these credits to people? If you've ever been a part of an accredited body, you have probably had the experience of going to these things, these events, and finding that for the most part, they're pretty boring, they're pretty banal. And what you're doing is you're showing up there just to like get the credits. So it's not very rewarding. It kind of sucks. So we're trying to break out of that. But here's the deeper problem I'm present to, which is that the ICF will not award credits for creating prosperity, for coaches creating business, for coaches succeeding and bringing on board clients. They hold that as separate from the actual work of coaching. They're like, that is not part of the core competencies. That's marketing. That's whatever. Which then has all of the coaches under this body do the same thing. They relate to it the same way. Hey, Carl, good afternoon. So the coaches then start to relate to, oh yeah, there's that thing over there called sales and marketing that I have to do. And then there's the thing I love to do called coaching. And then they divide them, they silo them. And I think that's doing a tremendous disservice to coaches, to the coaching profession, to every client that these coaches go and talk to, because instead of getting the gift of seeing how like, oh my goodness, we can show up and we can really bring the being of coach and honor these competencies, and that's what creates a client. Instead, people are like, over here is the stuff I do when I'm a coach, but until there, I have to do this stuff called sales and marketing and hire people to bring me hot leads and all of that sort of stuff. So the division that gets created is actually happening right at the top. The International Coach Federation is, I'm going to say, complicit in creating this divide. And then that leaves the whole profession aiming towards something that actually sucks, which is sales and bulldozing and marketing. Hey, Mia. Good afternoon. Good evening. Hey, Suraj. Nice to have you with us. I've missed hanging out with you too, Suraj. I miss your deep, lovely, soft, gentle, kind voice. It's not the same without you. Brian, I'd love to have you in that group with us. The nice thing about that course is it's not an overly expensive one. And when people are like, well, I really want to do one-on-one work with you, Adam, I'm just not there yet. I often invite them like, well, do this thing first because it's going to support you to get there. It's going to help you get along the way. We do have the UK crew. We got Carl, Lindsay, Suraj, Mia, full on UK crew. Hey, Sachko. Good morning. So Anyhow, I'm whilst my one-on-one work is a little bit quieter right now, I've got a lot of attention on these other things, and one of the things that's cool about that is I think people tend to have the experience of like my experience of people as I start to break this down for them and help them see it from a different lens from the this or that, the siloed one, is a sigh of relief and like a well, it's really relief. Like, oh, thank God, because something about this felt bad or awful, or I was just like, I guess I have to force myself to do something like that. Maybe it doesn't have to be that way. And sort of like almost like, wow, I felt like I was taking crazy pills, but everyone else was taking the crazy pills. And then so I just was like, I guess I got to keep taking these crazy pills and finding a way to like it. And so we're moving them out of that. Bonjour, Emmanuel. And hello, Sherifat. So, anyhow, that's what I'm spending a lot of the time on these current weeks. And the last thing I'm spending a lot of time on is getting the spectrums of being all the way to the point where it's ready to be published. We have the alpha edition, but that is not what's coming out. The alpha edition is sort of a smaller book. My vision for the spectrums being a large, almost like a textbook, far less boring is my hope. But with like a really like the intention is one, here's a model for how to relate to and work with yourself and other people. Two, here's how this applies within the context of everything out there in the world currently. Here's how this lines up with Myers-Briggs. Here's how this fits into the Enneagram, all of that sort of stuff. Three, here's a whole listing, like 25 different ways that people can be, people that like ways people are. Here's how to spot them. Here's how you work with these different things. Here's what you can expect, all of that stuff. And then finally, what I've been working on lately is a list of basically like generic practices. So as I've gone through and edited and finished all these 25 ways of being, I noticed there's themes showing up like um, for this particular quality, like for power. People that are power often create a bit of a disconnected relationship to their own anger because anger is a very powerful emotion. And people who are power either conclude from their survival mechanism, one, I really have a tendency to hurt people, and I don't like that. And I'm really committed to not doing that because I love people and I care. And so they stuff their power in a box. Consequently, they do the same thing with their anger. They take their anger and they shove it down. Or they go to the other side, which is, fuck it, I'm here to make some stuff happen. I'm here to create something in the world. I'm here to have an impact. I'm just going to have to learn to be okay with the wreckage that gets caused as I do so. And so they, in order to do so, they have to disconnect themselves from their own impact so they can keep doing the thing that they're here to do, which on the one hand is better, but on the other hand, there's like this wake of destruction behind them. And so what these people tend to do with their anger is just like spray it, fuck it. There's no responsibility, no capacity to calibrate any of this. And so as I was writing these and editing them, I was noticing like, oh wow, there's some themes here, like being with our emotions. How do we practice with that? And so I began to write this section, which was, some general practices, like how do we be with something? What does that even mean? And then I was like, well, if we're going to talk about that, I got to talk about like responsibility versus blame. How do we distinguish those two? And then, okay. And so it's just started to grow to the point where it's like, damn, this is a big ass list. And from that big ass list, create like this chapter that's full of practices. So it's kind of cool because I think that what this will provide is not just an ability to relate to and see people differently, but also some stuff you can bring into your coaching practice wherever you are and be like, oh, wow, I can start to see that what's going on here has the words of responsibility, but the client or the person I'm leading is really hanging out in blame. And you can never get from here to there. You got to address the blame first before you can actually become responsible. So anyhow, that's some cool stuff that's going on. Manuel, I loved acknowledging you. It was neat to get to, because on these lives you're kind of just like a name. You're more than a name, of course, but it's not quite the same. And so when you put your hand up for acknowledgement, it was cool to look through your page and be, oh my goodness, this woman's up to some amazing stuff. This is so cool. It's been a big theme. I'm about halfway through the 80 plus acknowledgements that people put their hands up for. Many mornings I don't want to do them. Many mornings I wake up and I'm like, I gotta do that thing. By the end of it, I'm always grateful I've done it because it opens my heart. But many mornings I wake up and I'm like, fuck, I don't want to open my heart. Fuck you. Um, and the cool thing is the people that I have no idea who they are, and I just feel into them, look at them, get a sense of how they show up on Facebook, and then get to acknowledge them for that. And what's really neat is my friend, who's not a coach at all, but one of my oldest friends was like, yeah, so how do you, like, wouldn't that be a bit misplaced or challenging? Because the way people show up on social media is like a mask we're wearing. It's a front that we're putting forward. So aren't you going to be doing that wrong thing? And the whole premise of my work and your work, if you choose to take it on, if you're drawn to it, is that no matter what people do, no matter what people try to project, the light is always available behind it. We can always feel that. This is why phoniness triggers us, because we can tell it's phony. Always, on some imperceptible level, we have a feeling for it. And so the thing that I think is really beautiful about this work is that, yeah, I'm going into this jungle, this world where we've been trained to be phony, and I'm giving people the gift of them being seen. And I'm giving myself the gift of seeing someone past what's showing up on the surface. And that's amazing. That is such a cool gift to give yourself. Um, Thanks, Seven. Yeah, I open my heart. We have to be love. We must take this on. Okay, well, we got some rad topics. I'm stoked to talk about these. Let's see. I've just got a little bit more coffee to finish, and then we're gonna crack. Let's do this, guys. Let's get through this coffee. I don't even need to finish the coffee. I don't have to do that. I'm a grown man. There's always more coffee. Let's pour this tea. Thank you, Suraj, for saying that. One of the things that's been really rewarding is people sharing the impact of the acknowledgement. Because we don't do that very often either. Have you noticed that? We Hey Sarah, good evening. Another member of the UK crew. Strong UK contingent today. You guys are crushing it. We acknowledge someone, and then what people do is they tend to go like, "Ah, thanks," or we brush it off, like, "Oh yeah, that's cool," but we do all these things to diminish the impact. And in a way, one of the nice things about this is it's just a series of voice messages you got. You can do that, but like the voice messages are still there acknowledging you. You can re-listen to it and brush it off some more, but it's still coming in. And so it's kind of cool to do that. And it's been really neat hearing people share like the impact that it's had on them. All right, well, let's get to these topics. Where the heck are these stupid things? Here they are. So I'm going to start right at the top with what Andrew's written. How do you truly own your greatness when it comes to supporting others? And I'm probably going to broaden this out to what does it even mean to own my greatness? Andrew says, sometimes I'll find I'm looking for certain things that make it more likely that I can help someone before making an offer for a conversation. I'd like to be faster, more bold, and just owning that my coaching skills really do help others and asking for more conversations rather than staying in my comfort zone. So, I do that at the end of every single one of my calls, Tom, is invite people to decide what they would like to be acknowledged for. And as you can probably imagine, a lot of people struggle with that. A lot of people struggle because they're like, well, what am I allowed to be? What am I worthy of being acknowledged for? All of that sort of stuff, instead of like, what would I love to be acknowledged for? We are unwilling to give ourselves just the gift of being acknowledged for who we are or who we wish we were, which is a function of who we are. Instead, we're like, I must earn it before I can receive any kind of recognition. It's really, imagine parenting from that lens, right? And then parenting is such a beautiful model for where we're trying to get back to through this work, because a parent comes to their child with, I hope, and I trust often, unconditional love. Child does whatever the child does. Doesn't mean there's no consequences or anything, but the parent works themselves out to find their way back to loving that child. And most of what people are doing from our fear is a function of stuff that was put together in our childhood when we were about 4 to 6. So if we can start to relate to people as the children, and the wounded child, the hurt child underneath, we can start to gives us a lot more access. So let's first talk about owning our greatness. Like, what does that even mean? So there's two ways we disown our greatness. They're like kind of they're a reflection or a reciprocal, or they're correlated with whatever the shadow is. So the first way we disown our greatness is by shying away from it. So if we're talking, let's use brilliance as an example. One of the ways people of brilliance will resist, shy away, pull away, disown their greatness is by insisting they're not that brilliant. So I was on a call with someone the other day who's delightful, and we got on, and he started by sharing how, my website, it's like Adam Quiney, leadership for the smartest people in the room. And he was like, I could never do that. I never hold myself that brilliant. And I know I'm not that brilliant. Brilliant people know a lot, including knowing that they're not that brilliant. And so that's an example of what it's like for someone who's brilliant. Like the guy was talking, and I was like, this guy's fucking brilliant already. I can just tell. Like he's using good words and he's speaking brilliantly about how he's so clear he's not brilliant, all of that stuff. So that's the first one we do. We disown our brilliance. We shy away from it. I'm not smart enough. I'm not generous enough. Oh, I'm not that generous. All of that stuff. Diminish ourselves. And then the other side of it is the fear that we're not enough of that thing. So we aggrandize, we try to prove to the world and to ourselves that we are that thing that we're afraid we're not enough of. And you can probably see that like one will lead back into the other. So if I'm actively diminishing my brilliance, if I'm actively proving to myself and others that I'm not that smart, either by my words, my actions, what I say, what I insist upon. Let's have our first sip here, guys. If I'm actively doing that, I'm going to be left in an experience in my life where I am not seen for nor recognized as part of who I am innately. That will happen whether I'm consciously aware of it or not. Just the simple act of disowning something that is innate for me is going to naturally create this experience of like of a lack of recognition. I'm like, ah. And so from there, I'm going to sort of then feel compelled to like compensate in the other direction. So I'm going to be like, well, fuck you for not seeing my brilliance, or like, I really want to be seen as brilliant. And so then I go out of my way to prove that who I am is brilliant. Maybe if I'm talking to someone brilliant, I like try to use bigger words to kind of get up there with them and sort of have that conversation. And so, and then consequently, that's going to leave me feeling at times a little phony or like I'm trying to prove something. And fuck that. And then I'm going to respond by going back to the other side. So these are the ways we disown whatever it is we are, is from a lack of trusting that we already are something, right? Like if you already knew who you were was light or generosity or divinity, you would not have the need to go and prove to yourself or to tell yourself or to insist that you are that thing. It's a little bit like how this is how affirmations fail, because they're over top of something we haven't distinguished. So we've got this underlying story like I'm worthless. And then so what we try to do is like write on our mirror or make a mantra where we're like, I am worth it. I am worth it. Which intuitively makes sense, but people like, for example, I don't have a story of me being worthless. I got a ton of other stories about how I suck, but worthlessness is not one of my stories. And consequently, I don't go around telling myself that I am worth it. It's just not what I do, because it's not even a conversation I'm in. Worth it, not worth it are actually parts of the same box. And so both of those fail. Just like I'm dumb, this is part of my conversation, I'm not smart enough, I'm really, really smart. And then trying to like wrestle back. It's like a tug of war you're stuck in. The way you win a tug of war, ultimately, like the real winning in a tug of war is to just drop the rope and walk away. I don't want to tug at this. It's not that much fun. So then to bring this back to the to where we started, which is like, how do we own our greatness? What does that even mean? It really begins by noticing all of the stuff we're doing that's an act of disownership. My cat doesn't have to like own that he's a cat. He is a cat naturally. He just has to be himself. And he doesn't have to work to do that. He just bees himself. And you too are the same way. Your greatness is there all along. It's always there. If you are someone who is brilliance or love or whatever, all there is for you to do is trust that that's who you are. It's all the other stuff that we've put on the sides and bunged on and like the strategies to ensure that we're seen a certain way. That's what gets in the way. And so now if we bring this back to your question, Andrew, which is kind of like, I'm doing a bunch of stuff before I just offer someone a conversation, or, you know, I want to own that my coaching skills really do help other people. The place I would have you start to look is like, well, what do you do that is a compensation for your fear that your coaching skills aren't really helping people? What's the stuff you do that is compensating for this false belief you might carry that you're not enough in some way? So, for example, if we're talking about brilliance, I could take a look and be like, Evan, I saw that. I saw what you did there. I am not above this. I am with you. I'm not making those jokes. I'm leaving those for you guys. You guys get to grab those. If I were to take a look and be like, what do I do that's a compensation for like my fear that I'm not enough of? Well, one place I might see is like, well, when I'm at an event with like people that are really smart, I can start to try to like talk about other topics that I know sound smart. I could like steer the conversation to quantum physics or like cryptocurrency or stuff that I know I can speak about intellectually and with a lot of depth of knowledge. And it's the trap here is like, well, but what if I want to talk about those things? Great, talk about those things. But what we're looking at is who you're being that has you steering the conversation there in the first place. And so it'd be like, oh, I'm steering the conversation there so that I can talk about it from a really intellectual sounding place, because that would then overcome my fear that I'm not enough. So trusting ourselves in our greatness and acting from our greatness is not about not having a fear that we're not enough. If you never had any fears about not being enough of something or the other, you probably wouldn't be very human. It'd be nice. It's a nice fantasy. Like, oh yeah, I just never have fear, but that's not the way we work. It's not about not having those fears. It's that how we speak, act, and show up in our lives and experience our lives is not a function of reacting to those fears. So we allow those fears to be there without needing to do anything about them. And that's really the path to owning our greatness. That's how we create that. So if you were like, hey, there's a part of me that's great as coach, you might just start to get curious, like, well, what do I do that's a compensation for the fact that I'm afraid I might not be great enough? And just start to notice these sort of things. That's how we begin to own our greatness. I'm just going to read some of the comments you guys have here. Andrew, you say it's amazing to experience that acknowledgement. It's been really cool to actually be asked where I'd like to be acknowledged from my coach right now as well. Yeah, it is. It's a real, and Heather, you were saying, asking your clients this has been really powerful. I find asking my clients what they'd like to be acknowledged for is it's one of the earliest transformative things we can do. And the reason for this is that being acknowledged is to be loved. It's to receive love without any requirement, without any strings attached, without any, like debt incurred, which are all kind of the ways our relationship to love is strewn with this stuff, right? If someone gives me love, I have to give them love back, right? We've all been in that relationship where the person says, I love you. And we're like, I love you too. It's automatic. If I let that hang, I'm a bad person. Then I'll have to have a difficult conversation. That's just one of a myriad of examples. And so asking someone what they'd like to be acknowledged for lets you see their relationship to love in the moment. So for some of my clients, they like white knuckle through it. You can tell. It's like they're holding their breath as I'm acknowledging them. Or they get really busy and they start to multitask. Or they are like, I don't know. What do you want to acknowledge me for, Adam? So rather than rather than choose something in themselves and be like, I want to be acknowledged for being this and owning that, they offload it, they delegate it to me so that they don't have to be with their own discomfort around it. So when we take on this practice of acknowledging people at the end of a coaching call, it serves two purposes. One, it allows us to like love them up. Coaching's challenging, edgy, and scary when it's deep. It's not even always that, but often it can be. It's confronting. We're leaning into the edge of our fear, the edge of our discomfort. And so receiving love, being loved, being held is a really beautiful thing at the end of that. But it also allows you to notice their experience, relationship to, and strategies around love so you can start to help them with that. Because if they are doing this sort of stuff just around simple acknowledgement, it's showing up everywhere in their relationship, their marriage, their family. These sort of people will like, if you can't receive acknowledgement, you're not able to give it very well either. That's just the way it sort of goes. So it's a beautiful practice. Heather, you said you coached her on Driven this morning. Your beautiful young client so benefited from sharing this section with her. Oh, nice. She's living. Oh, you mean the quality of being of Driven? That's cool. I love that. She's living in the torture of being in the extremes of this quality. It was exciting for her to see this wave showing up, and the judgment of others who show up in under the under expression. Yeah, I love that. And thanks Heather for the acknowledgement there. I'm not sure if Driven made it. I think Driven might have gotten removed and replaced with possibly Purpose in the extended one. There's a few of those qualities of being that I shifted out and then put other, like I think Possibility is in the alpha, but it got replaced with Magic. Kind of the same quality, but that's really cool. Sarah, you've been talking about brilliance today and how it's easier to own wisdom. Yeah, totally get that. Okay, well let's go to our next topic. Where did I? Oh, here we go. So David, you asked about possibility. I think Tom's one is what I want to talk about. Big thanks to Andrew, David, Evan, and Tom for the topics that you shared. It's so valuable, so helpful to all of us. So let's talk about the two sides of codependency. I wonder, let me just check in here. So there's always two sides to any particular way of being. For example, if you have an abuser, you will have an abused. What that means is that you will have someone who their survival mechanism, their way that they learn to get through life is to be abusive. And you will have someone else who their way of getting through life is to be abused. And this what we call like I think of it like reciprocals. So in math, a reciprocal is like if you took 3/2, the reciprocal to that is 2/3. You flip it. And when you multiply reciprocals together, they equate out to a 1, always. So like 38/9 times 9/38 will always equal 1. And so with our reciprocal, there is like a wholeness that is created. That's the magic of relationship. And so for any quality of being that we want to come up with, we could be like narcissism. There's going to be a reciprocal for which narcissism fits. And you can even start to imagine like who would be drawn to the narcissist's energy? Well, it's going to be people that if the narcissist like really makes time for themselves and really puts themselves first and foremost, that's going to be really appealing to the person who kind of is a doormat, who never puts themselves first. And so these reciprocals come together, and then they each, at first, is really like, oh my God, this person, I love how they can stand and be in the world, and it's so incredible. But then over time, we start to resent them and pull them. We want them to pull back towards us and vice versa. So the doormat resents the narcissist for making time for themselves, and the narcissist resents the doormat for never making time for themselves and expecting them like, you expect me to sit back? Well, fucking show up. You never show up. So what is it? This is why in relationship we just get into a spiral, like a death spiral with one another. We can't seem to like come together because I'm pointing to your reciprocal. I'm pointing to your side of this wholeness over there, and you're pointing to my side, and we're both right. That's why this is why relationship coaches, counselors, therapists, etc., are so valuable, because it's someone outside of the relationship who can point to this stuff and point to the systemic thing. Heads up, Democrats versus Republicans, complete reciprocals for each other. And much like the way reciprocals work, the underlying qualities of being are very similar, even if they're expressed a little differently. I'm going to talk about this just from my friends and I have been having conversation lately about news media, news channels. And I'm going to talk about a very specific thing as an example, kind of like more of a pop example, a more common example, or one that's more out there in the world before we come back to codependency and the thrust of Tom's question. So if you watch right-wing news, mainstream news, so that I think that would be like Fox. I don't follow a lot of mainstream news. I'm more of an NPR kind of guy. That's what I like, or PBS. That's not because it's right. It's because that's what appeals to me. But like, so Fox, I'm not sure there's other mainstream right-wing news channels. But anyhow, if you watch those, one of the things you'll tend to be present to is a lot of righteous anger and righteous indignation. And that anger is expressed as fury, like fire and brimstone and slamming of fists and God fucking damn it, we're not going to stand for, like, there's a lot of that kind of energy. If you go to the left wing media, so that would be, I think, like MSNBC or stuff like that, I assert that there is the same quality of anger present. It's just that it's expressed differently. And so the left's expression of anger tends to be condescension, haughty arrogance, Haughty, kind of like this sort of looking down your nose at people and like speaking to them with a tone, that kind of anger. And on the surface, someone who's not really used to looking at the world through this ontological lens, you'd be like, they're completely different. They couldn't be more different, which is kind of true, but they also couldn't be more the same. It's like the heads and the tails on a coin. You could be like, those two couldn't be more different, but they're both two sides of the exact same coin. And so this is what you can see if you look at these two news sources, these two sort of sides, is that they're pointing across the aisle at each other and being like, they're blah, 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 blah. And the other side's like, they're blah, 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 blah. And it's like underneath, it's like you're both angry and scared and pointing over there rather than looking on this side to start to move through this. That's not a suggestion for a change for media or news or anything like that. That's a far greater problem than I'm even interested in tackling or thinking about or looking at or talking about today. But I use that as an example of like this fact that there's always a reciprocal when we are in some kind of relational dynamic. And the two-party system in the States is a relational dynamic. It's just on a broader scale, but it's still a relational dynamic. Whenever we have that, we tend to end up in a reciprocal relationship and condemn over there the behavior that we see while being completely unable to see that we too are party to that behavior. We are the other side of it. So then, now we can talk about codependency. So I'm going to look up, I don't actually, if I go here, I'm going to just look up this definition so we can work with it. Codependence. Codependent. Okay, so the definition we have as a starting point is an adjective. No, we'll go with a noun. A person with an excessive emotional or psychological reliance on a partner, typically one who requires support on account of an illness or addiction. Now, to be clear, as is always the case, we will create our reality. So if I have a belief that I require someone for my wholeness, then I'm going to find a way to manifest that belief. And I'm likely going to do it completely unconscious. So there may be an illness or an addiction. That's a great way to manifest a need for someone's support and help, but it doesn't have to be. It could be any number of ways. It could be like as soon as you get to scheduling, you collapse into a fit of tears, and that then requires your partner to come help you out. So because of this reciprocal nature, there's always a degree, like if we're talking on a scale or something, like there's no there's no black or white, codependent or not, right? Like as humans, you could make the argument that on some level we are all codependent because we are social creatures and we get into relationship with each other. And so there's always some degree. The notion of codependence, the definition there is that it's excessive. What is excessive? I don't know. You have to decide that. We're just going to take that as granted for now, so we don't have to spend too much time in the semantics, and we're just going to accept that there's a gradient, everything's on a scale, blah, blah, blah. So what would be the other side of codependence? Excuse me. If we look at that one side, codependence would be the codependent partner would be reliant, would be unable to make decisions for themselves, would be often walking around with a story that they are like fundamentally broken or not able to achieve something on their own without support. There's a degree of helplessness absent the support of the person that they are now enmeshed with. The other side to that, we could expect to see someone who is completely like there is no support required ever. That would be the other side of codependence, right? If codependence is like, I'm so dependent on you, the other side of it would be radical independence, extreme independence. It would be someone who never has any need for anyone's support. Reverse codependence, co-independence. Is that a thing? That could be a thing. And someone who tends to like not really be impacted by anything, because that would be the best way to never have anything outside of your control, and tend to be very controlling, manage things a lot to ensure that they stay quite small. And so these two partners are going to be irresistibly attracted to each other. And then what happens is the independent partner points over there to the codependent partner and is like, look at you being codependent, while being unable to see that they get something out of that. The independent partner gets the opportunity to have someone else's stuff to focus their attentions on rather than be with their own. It allows them sort of a degree of reprieve. Oh, I don't have to look over here. I can look over there. Just to be clear, this is me from Fear, come a long way, but like 10 years ago, this was my game all through. So I tend to end up with partners in relationships where this dynamic was playing out. And I was like the stoic white knight who had it all figured out. Fuck off, I don't need your help. And tell me more about you, because then I don't have to tell you too much about me. And so that was the jam. And both partners inside the relationship are left kind of feeling like that other person needs to change. Like, I've got it, it's working over here to some extent. There's some stuff I got to tweak and fix, but like, I would want my partners to stand more on their own 2 feet. My partners would want me to be willing to share more of my own foibles and my own challenges and to be more vulnerable, to actually like struggle with stuff so they don't feel like a complete weird alien left out in the cold. But we don't realize that's what we're left wanting from the other person. So we end up just acting out these habitual patterns and then clashing with each other and re-wounding each other. And so that's the way this stuff comes together, is that we end up in a relationship with our reciprocal, and we have the medicine to help them heal their own wounds, just like they have the medicine for us. But because so much of this doesn't get distinguished, we tend to operate over top of it. And then rather than heal it, we unconsciously and unwittingly continue to re-wound each other. We just keep poking at that same spot that's been there since who knows how long and making it happen further and further and further. And so this is the promise, actually, of your relationship. Whoever you choose to be in relationship with and wherever you choose to commit to being in relationship such that something can happen. Which is, the promise is like, we're going to fuck each other up. We're going to wound each other. We're naturally going to be a fit for the parts of ourselves that are kind of not broken, but like wounded. And by being committed to staying together and not creating something different, not going elsewhere, we are going to sit with that and work through it. And that allows us to start to heal together in partnership with someone. This is why, so first of all, this same dynamic, reciprocal thing, happens in coaching relationships, inevitably. It happens everywhere. Your friendships, all over the place. You can't, you will have pleasant, nice interactions with people that are not sort of like a fit for your, they don't plug into your stuff, but they won't be the deep kind of friendships that you cherish and at the same time get into friction with. That's just not how it works. So it's not like you never get into any kind of relationship, but you're just not going to plug into each other the same way, right? The square peg and the round hole don't tend to like, they come together and it doesn't totally go and they might like wave to each other, but it's not going to be the same kind of connectedness that the, how do I do this without doing the sex gesture, guys? I'm just going to go in there, that the round peg and the round hole are going to create. They're going to merge together a lot better. Evan, I love that book you just recommended, Getting the Love You Want. I always get his name wrong. I think it's not Harville, is it? Harville Huxley? He's got a weird name. Please type his name there. I really recommend the book that Evan has just posted in the comments. This man is brilliant, and he's got great structures of practice around this. This whole thing I'm describing ultimately stems out of his work, which is called imago therapy and dialogue, and really the imago model, which is the reciprocal connecting. So Harville Hendrix, thank you, not Huxley, Hendrix. I always think I'm getting the first name wrong because it's such a funny first name, and then it's always the last name I'm getting wrong. And people are like, "Are you thinking of the right person?" No, I'm not. Well, I'm thinking of them. I'm just getting their name wrong. Damn it. So, so this happens in every relationship, and a coaching relationship's no different. A coach will draw a client to them that's fixing for the same breakthrough, but tends to be at the reciprocal of it. And then for other breakthroughs, they'll be at the same end. I've talked about this before. And what that creates is over time friction. The coach and the client will like bump into each other. And as the client keeps having that part of themselves, that wound kind of exposed and rubbed, they inevitably get to the point where they're like, I don't think this is working. We're too nice. So we don't say like, the problem is you, coach. But we're like, the coaching, I don't think it's working. And so, it's been real. It's time to quit or take a break or whatever. And it's the fact that in a coaching relationship, if you're working with a coach who's really standing for you, you will have created a commitment prior to getting to that relationship. And that commitment takes off the table for a period of time that ability to just leave and go somewhere else to a new relationship. Takes away that ability. You're basically saying, I'm going to remove the escape route so that when I get face to face with this thing and when it's really painful and I want to leave, I don't have that option. I have no option but to create whatever transformation is necessary for this to stop being a friction, for this to stop being a hindrance to me, for this to stop being a pain. And that's what allows transformation to occur. This is also the power of marriage, which is that once we say I do to that person, we are, in theory, committing to like whatever comes up, I'm going to work through with you in partnership with you. And that demands a lot from us. It's not free. We need to seek out help from like counselors and stuff like that. But the question always comes, and it doesn't mean we don't make mistakes or have foibles or be human in it. What it means is as stuff comes up, we get supported on it. Rather than saying, you know what, I'm tired of you, I'm going to go over here to this person because they're a little more appealing. That is not to criticize or judge anyone in any way that has done that. It's just to point to the power of commitment and how that in a relationship has us actually work through the thing that's showing up rather than conclude the problem's over there and I'm going over here. That's a hard thing to do. And part of what makes it so hard is that by the time we kind of are really present to the rub, we've built up like years of contempt and resentment for the other partner. And so before we can even start to be like, I'm going to sit with this person and do the work, we have to do the precursor to that, which is like scrub off the contempt and resentment that we've got. And that's work over here. And that's hard work to do because our contempt and resentment works because it's about the other person. So it's like, but they're wrong and I'm justified in being wrong. And so we have to like let go of our position, release our justification and be like, I'm going to remove this contempt and resentment first. And on the other side of that, I'm willing to leave. I'm going to let that be possible, but I'm not going to leave from contempt and resentment. So my work first and foremost to remove the contempt and resentment, and then I can decide from there. And that gives you a much more powerful place. Hey, Hayden. Guys, Hayden's just commented this. He's the one that sent me this shirt. Hayden, can you post in the chat that link you just sent me so that everyone can like, if anyone's like, man, I want to get on this sweet action that Hayden's spraying around the internet, then they've got the link. That'd be awesome. So, yeah, so by removing our resentment, our righteousness, our contempt, by doing that hard work to scrub that off of us, which requires a lot of forgiveness, completion, and responsibility. By doing that, then and only then can we leave from an empowered place. Appreciate you too, Hayden. Guys, there's the link. So check it out. Hayden's got some cool shirts up there. Most people leave any kind of relationship from their resentment and their contempt. Now, the resentment and contempt may not show up it may not occur on the surface like resentment and contempt. It often occurs very pleasant and reasonable in that like gross bullshit kind of way that things can occur pleasant and reasonable. So it can occur like, oh, it's not you, it's me. This is about me, but I just feel in my core, and it's like, fuck you. If you would just own as a starting point that this is all me, that's what's there, then we could start to do some work. So the hard part about scrubbing away the contempt and resentment is first we have to own it. That's where we begin. Then we can remove that stuff. Then we can make an actual empowered choice rather than a choice that's a reaction to what has built up. And so I really think what would be powerful in marriage for people that are like, I want to come into this marriage from a place of really powerful commitment, is that to get a divorce, you would have to do like, you'd have to work with me for 6 months. That's how I think that would be powerful. Because what's going to happen in those 6 months are people going to scrub this down. They're going to start to move through the contempt and resentment, which we don't want to do because we don't want to let them off the hook because we feel we're right about it, but we actually do it for ourselves. So we let ourselves off the hook. We unburden all of that stupid stuff. And then we could be with that person and be like, all right, now that's gone. What do I see from this place? You'll see something drastically different. If you don't follow Sachiko, you really should. And she's got a really inspiring, Sachiko, if you're here, would it be all right if I shared a little bit about our work together? Or would you rather I not? I don't want to share too deeply about it, but just sort of like, I found your story really inspiring about how, when we started, there was a lot of that resentment and contempt built up, and then how you moved through it and the breakthrough that you created. So if you can just let me know, Sachiko, if that'd be all right for me to share, that would be awesome. Evan says, weekly intentional relationship containers using Hendricks practices have been really powerful. Awesome. Thanks, Sachiko. I often, with couples I'm working with and with Bay and I, we use what Harville calls the intentional dialogue, which is a container to speak your truth and to be heard in your truth. And that is it. And empathized with, but that's part of being heard. It is not about speaking my truth so that Bay does something different. It is not about speaking my truth so that Bay apologizes profusely to me for it. It is not about speaking my truth so that Bay says, you're right, I'm scummy, or whatever my truth happened to be in the moment. It's so that she can give me the experience of me being heard and being empathized with, which is different than just making me right. Making you right is like, you're right, I am a piece of garbage. Empathizing with someone is like, I can really get, given what you shared, how I occur like a piece of garbage. Different places to stand. Both hard, but the empathy one is broader. It allows for a lot more to coexist in the space. So really, really great work. So Sachiko, I think just a beautiful example of the work we're talking about here. When she and I first started working together, one of the things, you probably remember this, Sachiko, was she was very adamant about seeking her own independence. She was in a marriage, wanted something different, don't want to talk about it. How do I create the next thing? And what I was present to is like, oh, it feels like there's a lot of built up like anger and upset and resentment directed at her husband. And it was so built up that there wasn't even the room for a conversation about considering to take a look at it, right? Not even wanting to take a look over on this side, but instead, like, this sort of resentment is truth. It's not like something we could work with or move through or even take a look at. It's just like, that's abject reality. So help me figure out the best steps forward. And during our time together, Sachiko took on a tremendous amount of like responsibility in her own life. Not It wasn't easy. It was slow, and what we were doing is we'd get into our conversations and I gently point to like a place where it felt like she had this kind of energy, which is like, but it's them or it's that thing over there, or the reciprocal to that, which is like, it's me, I'm the problem. I just need to learn to not be X, Y, or Z, and instead to slowly and surely learn to take more and more responsibility. And what happened in the end was that she started to scrub away, like by becoming more responsible, by being able to own more of her own experience and what was getting created. That started to open the door for the opportunity for her to start to get what we'd call complete, to start to scrub away. I like to think of it like a kettle that's got lime built up. You just scrub that lime away to start to remove those scales, to start to scrub away the resentment and the contempt. And what that started to open up for her was the ability to see like the good over there again, and the opportunity that existed, and the love that she had for this man, and the love that he had for her. All of that was obscured because of all of the resent and contentment that had naturally occurred, just like it would in any relationship. Any relationship you're in, this is gonna build up. There's an adage that familiarity breeds contempt. And I really love that adage, that more time we spend with someone, the more we bump into them. And each time we bump into them, we build contempt, friction. Why do you keep bumping me that way? And so as Sachiko did this, what it made available was the opportunity to choose into a relationship from a totally new place. The old place would have been, I'm choosing out because fuck them, or I'm choosing in because fuck me, right? Like, fuck me, it's my fault, I shouldn't, blah, 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 I'll choose in. And neither of those choices has a lot of possibility. People tend to stay from fuck me and they tend to leave from fuck you, but they're like the like the reciprocals of something, they tend to stem from the same underlying thing. And as Sachiko moved through that and really took that work on, it's not that she chose one of these two things. It like that binary set of options, she transcended that. That's the nature of a breakthrough. So now she was able to choose into her marriage from an entirely different place and create an entirely different experience and show up and be entirely different from having done that work. So that's the magic. That's the miracle and the promise of relationship. That's what commitment affords us. And I give you permission to divorce or leave your partner or do whatever else you want to do. None of this is a requirement or anything like that. But what I would say is that the most powerful way to leave something is from a place where there's nothing wrong with it. And not that shitty, nothing wrong with it that we do where we're like, fuck them. I'm going to tuck that in a box. I'm going to bury that 6 feet underground. I'm going to pave over that. I'm going to build a house on top of it. There's nothing wrong with them. I get that they're totally perfect and they're fine like that. And I just want to leave because I think I just want a partner who's more lit up. Right. There's the thing that's wrong with them. They're not lit up enough. So real amazing opportunities that can grow from that. What do you guys hear in that? I'd love to hear some people share just something you got from that or something that you're present to in your own lives or the lives of your clients or anything along those lines. That'd be cool. Let's see. Practices, path practices, things to take on to start operating from third stage leadership. It's a good question. I guess I'll start to talk about that. Let me have a sip here. I want to hear, please share what you guys are, yeah. Sharifat, you say, am I saying, or so am I, I'm saying, when one of the partners do their own work, that can allow for a better relationship. Yeah, it's a challenging, my nose is itchy. It's a challenging thing because on the one hand, if it's only ever one partner doing the work in a relationship, that's unsustainable. On the other hand, it has to be one partner doing their work first. What tends to happen in relationship, especially as contempt is built up, is that we sort of sit there and we're like, well, you need to go before I go. And then this person's like, well, you need to go before I go. And then we're both, well, I did one step, you didn't. And then, well, I did one step and you didn't take the second. And then we just stay and loggerheads with one another. And so while it's true that it's unsustainable for only one partner to always be the one doing their work, more often than not, rather than that being the thing in the way, it's the other thing I mentioned, which is like neither partner is really willing to be the one to go first and to really lean into this stuff. And having said that, yeah, when one partner takes on some of their work and starts to be more responsible, that creates a space where the other partner can start to show up differently. And even if this other partner over here never does their work, so to speak, it might just be that their work looks different than the way this partner thinks it should. If this partner really does their work to scrub off the resentment and the contempt and get themselves to a place where like they can truly love this person exactly as they are, and there's nothing they need to leave or force themselves to run away from or anything like that, then even if they choose out of the relationship, they're doing so from a brand new place. They're doing so from a place free of fuck you or fuck me. They step out of the wagon rut of one direction forward or one direction backwards, and that's your choices, and they transcend that. They get out of what's binary. And that's the possibility there. Really, no one's sharing what you got from any of this conversation? Guys, I need your support here. I need you to share. Type something. What's something you're like, oh shit, I took that away. I saw that. Don't make me do all the heavy lifting. I'll do most of it, but y'all got to be my reciprocal here. So please share that. Please share something. And oh, great, Andrew, thank you. I'm going to read what you said here. What an amazing topic. It's been really interesting to think of how to empower yourself as an individual and standing for what you want while getting in tune with that third stage of leadership where you still care about your impact on them. It occurs, there's one more place that is worth mentioning as far as this kind of relational dynamic we're talking about is concerned, which is, Carl, you got loads. Tell me, share some of it, Carl. Okay, you're processing. Got it. Well, thanks for sharing that. That's a value. That really is helpful. So the more you guys engage here, the better. And the best way to engage is just type anything or like a heart or whatever. But what I'm going to say is one of the chief places we see this relational dynamic happen, which is I stay as a fuck me or I leave as a fuck you, is the coaching profession. So what a lot of people do is they have a job or a career, and because they stay in that career over time and because they're predictably and likely not getting supported very much, it's a rarity that people are working with a coach. That's not the norm. I am hoping at some point that changes. I'm standing for that. But right now, that's not the norm. For the most part, you can almost guarantee people are maybe seeing a therapist, maybe, if they're one of the ones that are kind of ahead of the curve, probably not seeing a coach. And so staying in their relationship with their job or their career is going to breed contempt and resentment. And what's happening ultimately is that the shadows of their greatness, the shadows of their essence, they are relying on those to achieve success in their jobs. We could talk about that, but you're just going to have to take me at face value so that we don't spend all our time laying that foundation. So we get into a job or a career that rewards us for our shadows. Operating from your shadows is inevitably draining because you are resisting being what you are innately. If I am brilliant and I'm actively trying to convince you not of my brilliance, or I'm going way out over the edge to make sure you understand how brilliant I am, that's tiresome. As opposed to if I just trusted that I was brilliant and didn't have to force anything forward. That's effortless. That's flow, or time spent with your friends. That's when time ceases to be something we notice. This, by the way, is part of the promise of this work, that nothing is draining because you are able to be, meaning you are able to be fully expressed and innately yourself with whatever it is you're doing. So you don't have to be like, I don't want that, I want this because this feels good. You can have it all feel good. So anyhow, people are in these jobs. They've learned to be their shadows to get succeeding. They do that for a long time. They get tired. They get bored. They get frustrated. And then, wu wei, indeed. Emptiness? Is that right, Evan? I think that's emptiness. And then they build up frustration and contempt and resentment. And then what happens is they get to the point where they leave as a fuck you to their job. They see something else and they're like, oh my God, the work of coach sounds so cool. There's many transitions you can make. I just notice a lot of people find their way into coaching because it's a sexy, trendy, appealing sounding career. If most people really understood what it required to be a masterful coach, they would be like, fuck that. Not interested in that. But never mind that. They're drawn to the sex appeal of it. And so they leave their job from a fuck you, which is not the most empowered place to choose into a new relationship. It's kind of like a rebound. And so often what happens early on is people jump into coaching. They're a fuck you to their old job. So they're not willing to do that to earn any income. They've shut that door completely. And then they're over here trying to learn a new career, trying to learn how to make money as a coach, desperate, needy, hungry, scared, still resentful. And then from there, they reach for like, I need someone that can get me leads and marketing. And how do I just present the perfect copy and the nice, all of that stuff happens. It sucks for me, if not them, but I'm trusting it sucks for them. And so the few people that end up working with me, because a lot of them hang out trying to do that marketing thing, spend most of their money there. And then by the time they meet a coach like me standing for something different, I just don't have the money, maybe later, or you know what, I just don't think coaching's for me, and they leave. The people that do get into a relationship with a coach like me or someone like that, what tends to happen is very soon we have to start working on that disempowered relationship to their old career, to what they did, to the fuck you that they have for law or accounting or whatever. And as they scrub that off, as they get complete and remove that and like start to let go of that, a couple of things happen. One is that sometimes they're like, oh, I don't want to be a coach. I was just so resentful of that previous career. I actually loved what I did. It's just the way I learned to be in it, I was blaming on them and then feeling burnt out, making it their fault, blah, blah, blah. I actually think I want to go back and revisit that. That's like so amazing. Not because they shouldn't be a coach, but because by taking responsibility and cleaning themselves, they're able to choose back into this existing relationship from a totally different, more empowered place. Much like Sachko just shared in the comments, said, when I changed, he changed completely. He didn't do any work on himself, but how she experienced him changed. So that's one of the things is people are like, oh my God, I don't think it's actually that I want to do coaching. It's this. By the way, most coach training skips right over the top of this because instead of doing the deep work where they invite you to really notice your relationship to stuff, to life, to your previous career and coach you on the transformational work that would open this up and make you uncomfortable, they're just like, here's a fuck ton of tools. And you're like, yay, I've got tools. Now I'm going to try to coach people with my tools. And you've done none of the internal work that would actually break through this and blah, blah, blah. So I offer that not as a dig at people that find their way into coaching from the fuck you to their old job, because that's okay. Like I got here from a fuck you. That's how I arrived. And I had the unbelievable good fortune of finding my way into a training program that stood for something different, that stood for something more than here's a bunch of tools to make you feel happy and off you go, try to change the world. But instead, we're like, yo, you got to do your work, man. There's a ton you got to do here. And so it's more, I'm bringing this forward to articulate that this kind of dynamic shows up in every relationship you can imagine. It can show up with your relationship to money. You can budget all your life and then be like, fuck you budgeting, and then go over here and jump into the reciprocal. I'm never going to budget anything. That's a relationship. You have a relationship to money. So all of these things, this relationship stuff exists everywhere. Thank you, Andrew. Bye. Carl, is there more growth in or out of a relationship? What do I say? That's a good question. Um, this will be a bit of an esoteric answer. So, uh, is it's going to be a little mathy. It's kind of like asking, is infinity divided by 9 a bigger number than infinity divided by 50? And, we're kind of like, well, divided by 9, or maybe I'll make it a little less confusing. Infinity divided by 10 versus infinity divided by a million, which is bigger? Well, it's almost moot because they're both infinity. Now, rationally, we kind of be like, well, but multiplying by a million, that's got to be bigger. But infinity is infinity. There is no, it's boundless. So to even ask which flavor of infinity is bigger, those questions in Zen, the way they would answer that is mu, 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 which is, you get the answer mu when it's sort of like the question doesn't even make sense. Not to make it wrong, but it's more like mu is sort of saying like unask the question. And so I would say there's an infinite amount of growth available down either path. And I would also say that when we are in committed relationship with someone, what happens is we're proximate with them. We are in close proximation with someone, close proximity, sorry. And so we're naturally going to bump into them more. And that's going to drive up more of our stuff, which presents a sharper mirror. It gives us more opportunities to see our stuff reflected over there. The way we see our stuff is how that person's fucking up. So you can go and meditate in a cave for the rest of your life and come up with great insights and have great things. And all of that is fantastic. And I would assert that when you go into the world and interact with more things, more of you will show up. You're going to get to see more of you. It doesn't mean you can't create great growth and all of that in the cave, right? It's like infinity times 2. But if you go into the world and bump into stuff, you get more inflection points, and that allows for more growth. So I do think, I don't know which spiritual teachers, but people have told me spiritual teachers say that relationship is the greatest spiritual practice, and I am a believer of that myself. My marriage is a constant source of like spiritual practice, spiritual practice. I was talking to one of my clients yesterday, and he was sharing describing Trump as like a spiritual teacher for us. Not the one we want, not the sort of Yoda-like teacher, but sometimes the spiritual teacher is like a kid coming up to you in the street and kicking you in the shin and then running away. That is a spiritual teacher because it's like an opportunity to sort of see your stuff and be like, fuck. So that's my answer to your question, Carl. Let's hit one more of these. Do I have time? I think I do. Oh yeah, nice and light. So I'm going to talk about I'm going to think more about your question, Evan. I really love that you brought that. I don't have a good answer in this moment. Oh, there's something I want to talk about before that. So I'm going to see if I can hit creating possibility in that conversation. And first, I want to talk about this like binary thinking and transcension to create a breakthrough and that sort of stuff. So here are a couple of examples of things that occur almost the same, but are distinct from one another. So focusing on what I want versus focusing on what I don't want. Now, as I word it that way, you're like, well, obviously those are different. But if you ask people what they want, they will tend to describe to you what they do not want currently in their lives. Me too, Evan. Those are the best ones. I like to try to answer from stumpedness, but I want to cover this other stuff first. So, what do you want? Well, I don't want my partner to be so nasty. And then, great, what do you want from a partner? Well, I just want them to be less like, it's a sure sign of a fuck you, by the way, that we leave from the fuck you when it's like, this is what my future partner, I want them to not be so closed. Yeah, you're hanging on to something, but never mind. Let's move off of that so I'm not beating the hell out of this dead horse. We need a less graphical image than dead horse. So what I want versus what I don't want. These are things that occur. It's like they are paths that almost occur very parallel to one another, but you will never get over to what you want from continually talking about what you don't want. Never. Um, what is wrong versus what is actually happening. So what I notice is a lot of the mainstream news, its focus is on what is wrong. This is what's going on that is wrong. Joe Biden is doing this, it's a disaster. Trump has done this, it's a disaster. And I want to be clear, this doesn't mean that there aren't things happening for which people should be held to account, for which we should not condone, for all of that, right? But what I'm pointing to here is underneath this is really the lens through which we look at something, which is to say who we're being as we talk or look at something. So what is wrong is about condemnation. It's about moral outrage. It's about something in existence that should not be in existence, and it is a problem that is in existence, versus what is happening. And these two things can overlap, right? You could ask me like, so what's going on, Adam? What's that weird thing on your face? And I could be like, oh, so what it is. See you, Tom. Look forward to whenever we talk next. I could be like, oh yeah, that thing on my face, it's a mole and it's there, and I could sort of like articulate what is so, the facts of what is so. So that's one way I can be. Or I can share sort of like, yeah, it's a mole on my face, and like I'm worried that it's going to become cancerous, and that's going to suck because I was really in that blah blah blah. And you could argue like, well, you can hopefully see that there's plenty of overlap, right? In both of these ways of speaking about it, in both of these qualities of being. It's not that by focusing on what's wrong, I'm not necessarily going to touch on the facts. It's that we will get a different experience of our life based on the lens we are choosing to come from. And that's the thing that is sneaky about these, because often we defend the place we are because we're like, well, it's not that different from over here. I am talking about what I want. What I want is not that, which is what makes them a bit of a sand trap for us. The last one is, this is a little bit nerdy, but so the scientific method, a scientist puts forward a hypothesis and then tries to prove that false. So he might say like, gravity only works inside of France. And so then his job is to test and prove that this is false. To prove that, he would go somewhere outside of France and he would see if gravity holds true. And if it does, then he'd be like, my hypothesis is false. Now I need to create a new hypothesis. So it's, can I prove this thing, this particular claim, false? Conspiracy thinking goes the other direction. So the way conspiracy thinking works is that, let me just make sure I've got the words right. Can I prove this false? Conspiracy thinking goes to like, I'm going to get the words wrong. That's why I'm like pausing and trying to, it's, can you prove this isn't true? I think, is that right? Or, oh, that's right. So the way conspiracy thinking works is it's like, if we were to look at this weird gravity kind of explanation that I've given you, it would be, can you prove that gravity is always present everywhere? So I'm trying to prove a truth rather than disprove a truth. And they occur very similar. It's like, well, on the one, you're just saying gravity always works in France, so I go outside of France and I prove that that's not true. Great. And on the other one, I'm just doing the opposite. I'm saying gravity is always the same everywhere, so why can't you prove that? And the reason is because to do that, you would have to go everywhere. And even then, how would you know that you'd gone everywhere? And so even though these things seem very similar, there's this subtle distinction that actually has them be completely opposite from one another. And so this is what happens with this is where conspiracy-minded thinking, people can often believe that they're thinking critically. They can believe that they're applying something akin to the scientific method, when in fact it's actually radically different. And that's what allows them to sort of spin out and end up over here where you're like, oh my goodness, how do you get there? And so these are all examples of where the lens we begin with can occur very similar, but end up leaving us far, far away from what we want. And this is sort of the sort of traps that I find a lot of people end up in. Another one I'll give you is liking something versus loving something. So when I was practicing as an attorney and surrounded by attorneys, this is before I'd done any work, this is kind of the path I was on, I could tell you very clearly how much I would even use the word love, but what I was speaking was like. I was speaking how much I liked my wife and I liked my life and I liked this. That will never be the same as love. There is a fundamental difference between like and love, and you will not get to love from like. That's not how it works because they come from a fundamentally different place. Like tends to be more of your head. I'm making some stuff up. I'm taking some liberties here, but I think you get the idea. Whereas love is like parents don't like their children. That's not how that feeling is not, it's just not the way it works. Okay, anyhow, I wanted to like introduce that as a concept and riff on it a little bit. I'm going to start to write a little bit more about these, but these are part of how, this is part of how, you can even say change is not the same as transformation. This is how transformation doesn't just happen on its own. This is why people don't just magically become evolved, fully expressed beings, because our ego has us focus on change rather than on transformation. I'll give you one more before we move on, which is focusing on the process rather than focusing on the declaration. So one of my clients, he came on, he was very excited, which was cool. I love it when he's excited, and he's very exciting to talk to. And he was sharing, he'd come up with sort of like some challenges for himself. So like 30 days of cold showers. I'm going to take that on as a challenge. And then this, and then this, and then this. So he'd like laid out some challenges, and we all like these, right? We're all like, yeah, the 30-day cold plunge challenge. Yeah, the this challenge. Yeah, the I'm not going to eat cheese for a month challenge. Those are great. There's nothing wrong with those. The thing is that that is different from a declaration thrown out, cast out into the ocean of possibility. So I was asking my client because he was, and the reason I was asking this because he was like, I really want to create some breakthroughs this year, Adam. So I'm like, okay, great. I'm going to ask questions in service of you creating a breakthrough. Are any of these challenges something for which you have no idea how you will accomplish them? And he thought about it and he's like, I don't think so. So they were all something that'd be uncomfortable, but they weren't something way out in the field of possibility. He has no idea how to get to them. They're inside his paradigm of what's currently possible. It's not fun to go and take a cold shower for 30 days. It shouldn't be. Maybe for Wim Hof, that'd be fun. But like for anyone that's never done this, to take a cold shower every morning for 30 days is like annoying. It's bracing. That first moment when you turn the faucet is like, ah. The cool thing you discover is that you move through that and then eventually you acclimate to the water. That's what you notice. But all the same, every moment before you turn that faucet head, it's like higher. Oh, yeah, there it is. There's the cold water shock response. And you do learn stuff. So it's not that you don't gain anything from it, but it's that these, if you imagine there's a whole circle with a pie in it, and the pie is your current range of what you are able, comfortable, willing, familiar with doing. These sort of challenges into discomfort are about moving out the edge of the pie you're already able to operate in. What most people do is they take on challenges like this, thinking it's going to give them the result that these declarations cast way out into the field of possibility will, thinking that it'll call them forward into their lives the same way, and thinking, fuck yeah, I'm doing it. Again, it's not that those challenges won't grow you in some way, but it will not cause transformation. They are fundamentally different from that which will cause transformation. And so this is what holds us. This is why these sort of challenges are cool, and I applaud them. And I invite people, and I invited my client to distinguish them from a natural breakthrough because they are distinct. Okay, last thing briefly is David says, I'd love to hear more about possibilities. I've been in conversation with people where there's a clear context around habits, tendencies, and patterns they'd like to get supported around, yet they don't have a clear and compelling long-term vision with tangible results and impact they'd like to create. It's a little bit of what we're talking about. So when we start a conversation with a coach, usually we're a lot more present to what isn't working and what we feel is broken about ourselves. That tends to be where we begin the conversation is, well, I don't want to work 60 hours a week anymore. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And so again, you can imagine this circle with a pie slice in it, and the pie slice is your current range. And most of our efforts to grow ourselves are about, like, if you imagine this is the pie and we're just expanding its size, that pie slice is going to grow larger, right? It's going to increase its overall area as the pie itself expands. But it will forever remain the same percentage of the pie. Even though it'll grow larger, the actual percentage of range that you have within this infinity of human expression does not grow. And so this is kind of what David's talking about, is that we set goals for ourselves. We create challenges. We say yes. We ask for, we allow ourselves to vision and dream for things inside that pie slice as it grows. So if your range is 15%, I don't know what the default is for people. We'll just use that number. Then we look for like it's almost like we can't even think beyond this. We're just like, well, what would I love to have in my life? And then where we inadvertently are looking are at the boundaries of that pie slice. We're like, oh, well, inside of this 15%, what else could I have? And then that's what we try to create. So what David's asking is like, well, how do we get people thinking outside of that? How do we do that work? And I don't have a very good answer for that, but I can tell you some of the stuff. So first of all, what I'm going to say is transformation happens outside of your pie wedge. That's number one. So if you're like, I want transformation, I want to expand my range of what's possible in my life, it happens outside of that pie wedge. Number two, you and all of us are conditioned subconsciously to think only in terms of that pie wedge. It doesn't have to be where that pie ends. You can think beyond, you can extend the line of that pie wedge out and you can vision inside of that. But to get past that, that's another thing altogether. We're conditioned out of that. We have a vested interest from our ego to push back into the realm of the pie and then to insist upon the change and growth that's available by broadening that. Three, the third thing we can do when we're trying to support people. So actually from number two, one thing we can do is have a lot of empathy and compassion for people that don't seem to be thinking outside of that. The third thing we can do is we can distinguish this with them. We can explain it like the way I have, or talk about it. We can talk about in our own lives, the places where like we've sort of sought to change or grow and how it's actually just created more of the same. We can use that. And we can help them see over here, see themselves in what we're describing. And we can distinguish with them like, well, would you say this is inside, like an extension of that pie wedge, or would you say this is like something you have just absolutely no idea how to make happen? It's completely outside of your realm of what would currently be predictable. You just don't even know how you'd make it happen. So we can help them start to do that. And then lastly, we can invite them into an exploration outside of the range of that existing pie slice. So like, what's something you'd love that you absolutely, it's almost like you've already decided it can't happen. Like you want it, you'd really love it. You just, because you can't see how to make it happen, because it seems so at odds with the way the world's been created for you, you've given up on it, or you've just decided, well, I'm not going to ask for that because why could I have that? And as coach, what we're working with, coach and leader, what we're working with people is to work on a gradient and help them expand and develop the muscle of envisioning things outside of the world that they know. And the way we do that is just by gently pointing to when we're not doing that, helping them distinguish between one or the other, loving them a great deal as they go through this, and not needing them to see anything. Just inviting them into that if that's something they want. So that's what I've got for you there, David. It's not the most I'm not going as deep or as instructional as we could because I think that's less fun. That's why. Okay, 11 thirds. Anything I want to share before we go? I want to plug a few things. I want to plug Hayden's company again. So check out the comments. Check out his shirts. See what he's got. They feel so good. These shirts are nice. They're like a nice cotton fabric. They feel really good. Um, they fit nice. I'm wearing a medium. I'm about 6'1" and weigh around 195 pounds right now. So that gives you an idea of like what fits me. Um, what else would I like to plug? Uh, Check out Get Lit if you don't already. I'll just put a link in the comments. GL, boom. That's my podcast. It's fantastic, if I do say so myself. And the current series that we're going through is called the Leadership Pipeline. So the Leadership Pipeline is the steps a leader must take when they want to begin, when they want to reinvent in their company. So most leaders show up, or they don't show up. They're like in the company and they're just like, let's create the impossible. Everyone, let's do the impossible. And of course, when you try to do that and you haven't addressed any of the existing stuff, they were like, fuck you. You said this 3 times in a row. Last year you said this and then you went off and did something garbage. No, fuck off with the impossible. And so the reason that's happening is because the leaders, they're bypassing parts of the pipeline. So what the leadership pipeline is like a series of steps the leader can walk through to actually reinvent and then create the impossible. It's like, what are the things the leader must do? And what this allows us to do is start to diagnose where in these steps is the bottleneck, so the leader can start to work with it. It's cool because as I do these steps, I'm like, oh, this isn't just for corporate clients or people. This applies in relationship, like romantic relationship. This is your pipeline right here. It's the same sort of thing. So that's a 6-part series that we're going through right now. And then past that, I don't know what'll happen next. Probably some talking about the spectrums of being and some qualities of being and stuff like that. So check out that podcast, subscribe to it. If you do subscribe to it, I would love it if you'd be willing to give me a rating or a review, or share it with someone and be like, look, I think this podcast is awesome and I think you should check it out. That helps so much. It's tough. It's tough being a dude just trying to grow organically, not really crazy about doing ads. Um, yeah, so there's that. Follow me on Clubhouse if you're on there. I've not started to do very much, but I've created an account and I'm starting to learn how that app works. And what's up, Bay? You just want to say hi? Yeah. Hello. So follow me there if you want to start to see the content I do produce. I think Bay and I are going to start to run some rooms where we basically do ontology. So we'll work with people, we'll draw out the quality of being in people, stuff like that. Should be very cool. Follow Bay if you don't already. So if you're not a follower of her work, you absolutely should check out what she's up to. Bay LeBlanc Quiney. She's doing amazing work in her own right. And lastly, if you are considering the Creating Clients course, which you should, and I'm going to put the link here for you, you should check that out, and you should just do it. And you should do it for a few reasons. One, the course itself is transformative. So if you want to start with like a taste of transformation, you're like, man, I can't do one-on-one with Adam. That's out of my league, or it's just too much commitment, or now's not the time. Then join the Creating Clients course. It's a great way to begin our work together, if that's something you desire. So rather than hang out in the like, I don't want to do this, it's only one-on-one, it's a bit of a setup for yourself. And that's what keeps most of what we want in life away from us. We're like, well, once I'm all the way there, then I'll do it. You need some support to get there. That's what this is available for. And I promise it'll change your relationship to sales. It'll change the prosperity you experience, and it'll make such a difference. The next course will start likely in, I'm not totally sure if it's either May or July, but you can head over to that link that I put there. It's a low cost, it's $1,000, a 10-week course. It will change your life. Add me on Clubhouse, Carl, and anyone else. Okay, love you guys. I hope you have an amazing weekend. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.